My name is Nicole Reeves. I'm 29 years old, and I live in Austin, Texas. I want to tell you about a Saturday morning in May, the day I walked across a stage in a black cap and gown to receive my computer science degree from the University of Texas, and looked out at the crowd to find where my family was sitting. I had emailed them the seat numbers 2 weeks in advance. I had texted my mom the day before to confirm. I had even sent my brother Marcus a reminder the morning of the ceremony, and when I found the section where I had reserved 4 seats, every single one of them was empty. Not late, not running behind, empty. I stood on that stage with my diploma in my hands and my name still echoing over the loudspeakers, and I looked at 4 vacant chairs and understood something I had been slowly learning my entire life. My family had decided, a long time ago, that I was not worth showing up for. My parents, Ron and Diane Reeves, had one child they were proud of, and it was not me. It was my older brother Marcus, who had gone into finance, married young, bought a house in their neighborhood, and made their social life easy. I was the daughter who had studied something they didn't understand, chased a career path they couldn't explain to their friends, and spent 4 years of college rarely coming home because home didn't feel like a safe place. I walked off that stage alone. My roommate Priya found me outside afterward and hugged me so hard the cardboard corner of my diploma tube dug into my ribs. She said, "I watched you walk." I cheered loud enough for all of them. And I smiled because I meant it when I thanked her. But inside, something had gone very still and very cold. I had spent 4 years working toward that moment. I had a 3.89 GPA. I had an internship at a tech firm already on my resume, and the people who were supposed to be most proud of me had not even bothered to send a text saying they couldn't make it. To understand why those seats were empty, you have to understand the Reeves family. My dad, Ron, was a construction site manager, good at his job, respected by the guys he worked with, and completely unable to understand any world outside of what he already knew. He had not gone to college. Neither had my mom, Diane, who worked part-time at a dental office and spent most of her energy managing other people's feelings, specifically Ron's. My brother Marcus had gone to a local community college, gotten an associate's degree in business, and then landed an entry-level job at a wealth management firm through a connection my dad had at church. In my parents' world, Marcus had done it the right way. Quick, practical, close to home, easy to understand. I had done it differently. I was interested in computers from the time I was 12, specifically in the way systems talked to each other, in how data moved and got processed, in the invisible architecture underneath everything people used every day. My high school math teacher, Mr. Hendricks, was the first adult outside of the internet who told me I was genuinely gifted at this. He pointed me toward AP Computer Science and then toward UT Austin's program, which was one of the best in the country. I applied, got in, and earned a merit scholarship that covered most of the tuition. I was proud of that. My parents' reaction was to ask if there was a shorter program somewhere closer to home. My dad had a phrase he used whenever I talked about my major. He called it playing on computers. He said it with this slight smile that made it clear he thought it was a hobby, not a career. My mom never corrected him. Marcus once told me at Thanksgiving that I should have done something more stable, like accounting. I was a junior in college at the time. I had already completed 2 internships. But in my family's framework, nothing I was building looked like success because it didn't look like anything they recognized. My mom called me the evening after graduation. I almost didn't answer. When I did, she led with, "We just got so busy, Nicole. Your dad had a thing with the crew at the job site, and Marcus had tickets to something with the kids." She said it the way people say things they practiced saying so they don't have to say the real thing. She did not say sorry, she said busy, as if my graduation were an inconvenience that had inconveniently scheduled itself on a busy day. I sat on the floor of my apartment with my diploma still in its tube on the counter, and I listened to her explain herself for 4 minutes without once using the words, "I'm sorry." Then she said, "You know your father doesn't think those ceremonies mean much anyway. He called it a failures ceremony. You know how he is, She said that as if, "You know how he is," was an explanation rather than an indictment. I asked her calmly why she hadn't come, even if my dad didn't want to. She got quiet. Then she said, "I don't like going places alone." That was the whole answer. She hadn't come to her daughter's college graduation because she didn't like going places alone. I told her I had to go. I hung up. I sat on my floor for a long time after that, and I made a decision that I would not spend another year trying to pull emotion or acknowledgement out of people who had decided I wasn't worth the effort. I was going to pour everything I had into my work, and I was going to build something so undeniable that the world would have no choice but to see it, even if my family never did. 3 weeks after graduation, I started full-time at Apex Systems, a mid-sized software infrastructure company in Austin. I had interned there twice, and they had made me an offer before I even walked across that stage, which my parents also didn't know because I had stopped sharing professional news with them after the third time my dad responded to something I was excited about with a shrug. My starting salary was $94,000, which was more than my dad had ever made in a year and more than Marcus currently made. I did not tell them that either. Over the next 2 years, I worked harder than I had ever worked, not to prove anything to my family anymore, but because I genuinely loved what I was doing. I was working in cloud infrastructure security, specifically in a niche area called Zero Trust architecture, which was becoming increasingly critical as corporations moved everything online and faced more sophisticated cyber threats. I had a natural instinct for it. My manager, a woman named Claire Ito, started bringing me into senior meetings within my first 8 months. By the end of my second year, I had led a project that saved Apex a contract worth $4 million by patching a security vulnerability before a client audit flagged it. Claire nominated me for an internal leadership track. I was promoted to senior engineer at 25, which was unusually fast. I still lived modestly. I had a 1-bedroom apartment, and I cooked most of my meals at home. I was saving aggressively and investing a portion of every paycheck, following the same personal finance principles I had taught myself in college. My parents had no idea what my life actually looked like. We spoke maybe once a month, brief calls with my mom about nothing in particular. I was no longer trying to include them in my story, but my story kept getting bigger anyway. 14 months before everything changed, I received an email with a subject line that my eye almost skipped right over because it looked like a recruiting pitch, and I got those constantly. It was from a woman named Dana Kerr at a company called Meridian Technologies. I almost deleted it, but something made me open it. Meridian was not mid-sized. Meridian was a $10 billion enterprise cloud corporation with clients including 4 major U.S. government agencies, 2 of the 5 largest banks in the country, and a roster of Fortune 100 companies. Dana Kerr was not a recruiter. She was the executive vice president of global infrastructure. The email said that Meridian had been following the work coming out of Apex's security division and had identified my name on 2 published case studies and 1 white paper I had co-written. Dana said Meridian was building a new division around Zero Trust enterprise security architecture and was looking for someone to lead it. She asked if I would be open to a conversation. I read that email twice, standing in my kitchen at 7 in the morning. Then I put my phone face down on the counter and stood there for a full minute before picking it back up and typing back that yes, I was open to a conversation. What followed was 12 weeks of the most intense professional process of my life. 4 rounds of interviews, a technical assessment that took me 2 full weekends to complete, a presentation to Meridian's board of directors in their San Francisco headquarters. I flew out on a Thursday, gave a 40-minute presentation on a Zero Trust framework I had designed specifically for their infrastructure profile, answered questions from 9 executives for another hour, flew home Friday evening, and then waited. Dana Kerr called me on a Wednesday afternoon while I was eating lunch at my desk. She said Meridian's board had approved the offer, and she wanted to walk me through it before it came through formally in writing. I put down my fork. She said the title was Vice President of Global Security Architecture. She said the base salary was $4.2 million annually. She said there was an equity package being structured with vesting over 4 years, and she said the total compensation package, when including bonuses, equity, and benefits, had been calculated at approximately $60 million over the contract period. I wrote the number on a Post-it note while she was still talking, just to make sure I was hearing it correctly. When the call ended, I sat in my chair for a long time without moving. The number on the Post-it note sat in front of me and did not stop being real no matter how many times I looked at it. I was 28 years old. I had a $60 million compensation package from a $10 billion corporation. I had built this, piece by piece, in the years since I had walked off that graduation stage and found 4 empty chairs. I had built it in silence, without encouragement from my family, without a single phone call from my dad asking how work was going, without my mom ever once asking about the projects I was leading. I had built it with Claire Ito's mentorship, Priya's friendship, Mr. Hendrix's belief back in high school, and my own stubbornness. I texted Priya one thing. 60 hours. She called me back in 30 seconds screaming. I had not told my family anything. Not the interviews, not the board presentation, not the offer. I had learned by now that sharing good news with them before it was fully solid only invited their skepticism to contaminate it, and I was not going to let them anywhere near this until it was done and signed and completely real. I signed the offer letter on a Friday morning. By Saturday afternoon, my mom called. She didn't call to catch up. She never called just to catch up. She called because Marcus had heard something from someone who worked at Apex, who had mentioned that I was leaving for somewhere big. My family had a network I had always forgotten existed, church connections, neighborhood connections, the kind of semi-connected small world where information traveled in indirect and unpredictable ways. My mom's voice on the phone was bright in a way it almost never was when she called me. She said, "Nicole, I heard you might have some news. Why didn't you tell us?" As if I had been keeping something from them unfairly. As if we were the kind of family where I naturally shared things. She said my dad wanted to have a family dinner. She said Marcus and his wife would be there. She said they wanted to celebrate. That word, celebrate, from the woman who had explained away missing my graduation as a busy Saturday and had relayed my dad calling it a failures ceremony, without flinching, that word sat in my chest like a stone. I told my mom I would think about it. She said, "We're your family, Nicole. Whatever it is, we're proud of you." I wrote down the time and location she gave me, and I said I'd let her know. Then I started planning, because if my family wanted a family dinner, I was going to make sure it was one none of us would ever forget. I spent 3 days deciding what to do and 2 days preparing. I decided I was going to go to the family dinner, but I was not going to walk in small. I called Priya and told her the plan. I called Claire, who laughed and said, "You do this exactly the way you want to." I showed up to my parents' house in Pflugerville on a Tuesday evening. I drove there in the same 2019 Honda Civic I had been driving since college because I hadn't bought anything new yet and saw no reason to perform wealth I had not yet received. I wore a blazer over jeans because I was not dressing up for them. I was not performing either. My mom had made a full dinner. The table was set carefully, which it never was when I came for regular visits. My dad was at the head of the table in a collared shirt. Marcus and his wife Tanya were already seated. Everyone was trying to be warm in that particular way. People are warm when they want something. My dad stood up when I came in, which he also never did, and said, "There she is," like I was a guest of honor at a party they had thrown for themselves. We sat down. My mom served the food. There was small talk for 20 minutes, and I let it happen. I ate and I waited. Then my dad set down his fork and said, "So, tell us about this job." And the table got quiet. I looked at my dad, who had called my graduation a failures ceremony. I looked at my mom, who had chosen not to come because she didn't like going places alone. I looked at Marcus, who had told me to do something more stable, like accounting. I took a breath and I told them everything, every detail. Title, company, salary, equity, the whole number. I said it flatly, without drama, like I was reading from a document. The table was completely quiet after I stopped talking. My dad had that look people get when they are trying to process something that doesn't fit inside the framework they built for understanding the world. Marcus's wife Tanya put down her glass carefully. My mom had her hand over her mouth. It was my dad who spoke first. He said, $60 million. Not a question. Just the number out loud, like saying it might help it make sense. I said yes, over the contract period, and I laid out how the compensation was structured so there was no confusion. He nodded slowly. Then he said, "Well, we always knew you were smart." That sentence. We always knew you were smart. After the failures ceremony, after the empty seats, after every playing on computers comment and every shrug and every holiday where my career was either dismissed or ignored entirely. We always knew you were smart. My mom started talking about how proud she was, and she was crying a little, and I believe that the emotion was real. I do. But emotion isn't the same as accountability, and pride that arrives because your child made $60 million is not the same as the pride that should have been there all along. Marcus said, "That's incredible, Nicole," and reached across the table to touch my arm. And it was genuine, I think, but it also came from a man who had told me to do accounting. I let them have their moment. I sat and watched my family feel proud of me for the first time in my memory. I noticed how good it felt to them to say they were proud, and I noticed how hollow it felt to me, not because I needed it anymore, but because I had needed it for so long in the past when they had nothing to offer. After dinner, my dad asked if I would sit with him on the back porch for a few minutes. My mom and Tanya started clearing the table. Marcus went to help. My dad and I sat in 2 old lawn chairs, and he held his coffee mug with both hands the way he always did when he was thinking. He was quiet for a while, and then he said, "I didn't go to your graduation." He said it simply. "No, we were busy." "No, you know how I am. Just the plain fact of it." I said, "Yes, you didn't." He said, "Your mother told me after I said what I said about the ceremony that she saw something in your face and that she didn't do anything about it." He looked at his mug. I didn't do anything about it either. That conversation on the back porch was not a perfect reckoning. My dad is not built for long emotional speeches. He doesn't have the vocabulary for it. But what he said was real in a way that the dinner table pride had not been, because it cost him something to say it. He did not ask me to forgive him. He said, "I think I made it harder for you than I needed to." And I told him the truth, which was that yes, he had, and that I had spent years building myself up without a single word of encouragement from home, and that it had made me strong, but it had also been painful, and he needed to know that. He nodded. He kept looking at his mug, and I let the silence sit there, because some things don't need to be filled. Before I left, he walked me to my car. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, "I'm proud of you." And I believed him. Not the dinner table version, this one. The back porch version. The one that came after he had sat with something uncomfortable instead of running from it. I started at Meridian Technologies 8 months ago. I am building a division from the ground up. I have hired 11 people, set the framework for our Zero Trust security architecture across 4 enterprise clients, and presented twice to the board already. The work is harder than anything I have ever done, and it is also the most alive I have ever felt professionally. Austin is still home, but I fly to San Francisco twice a month and to our New York office once a quarter. I bought a house 6 weeks after starting. Nothing extravagant, a 4-bedroom Craftsman in a quiet neighborhood with a good yard, because I had learned to value quiet and space above everything. Priya came for the first weekend, and we ate takeout on the floor because the furniture hadn't arrived yet, and it was one of the best nights of my life. My relationship with my family is what it is. My dad and I talk more than we used to. He asks about work in a way that is genuine even if he doesn't always follow what I'm describing. My mom sends me recipes and links to articles she thinks I might like. Marcus and I have found a version of a relationship that works between 2 adults who are very different people. None of it is the closeness I used to wish for when I was a teenager. But it is honest now, and honesty is worth more than warmth that isn't real. The girl who looked out from that graduation stage at 4 empty chairs is the same woman who signed a $60 million offer letter 4 years later. She did not need them to show up to become what she became, but she needed to tell this story because somewhere out there, someone else is sitting with an empty room. And I want them to know that the empty room is not the end. It is just the beginning of the part of the story that is entirely yours.